So, I'm still getting a feel for the Creator Studio here at Substack and for Substack in general. And this is my "What is this Substack" video, and should be podcast as well. I have it set up that way and that it should be available that way. And I'm going to try to make it available in other places as well. As time goes on, I'll update people about links to other locations, YouTube, where these videos will probably go to, at least the free ones. Various places to get a hold of the podcast, different places to get podcasts as that all materializes, as that all happens. But I'm just kind of starting out by trying to figure out what is this Substack, and this is as much me letting you in on my process of trying to figure it out as it is telling you what it is. So I've been thinking about starting a Substack for quite some time, and or something like this. I've done a variety of things that are kind of maybe a little adjacent. Years ago, I I've worked for a couple different small newspapers, small like alternative paper, school paper, these kinds of things. In those capacities, I mostly did like arts and culture stuff. A lot of things I've done has been arts and culture related. I did like music reviews, film reviews, and some like arts and culture related pieces just in general that were not reviews. And then a few years ago, I was creative director of a kind of a nonprofit startup for a minute before it kind of like didn't get its next round of grant funding. And that was called Rose City Commons and kind of the Portland area here. And I was very like culture forward, culture, community, arts um, oriented piece. And the timing on that ended up being kind of wonky. We were primarily going to be live event production, and then immediately COVID-19 swept the country, and we kind of had to retool into a kind of a video interview format that I did with people. And there was a lot of learning on the fly with that. And big props to and thanks to Andrew Morgan, again, who helped kind of set me up for that. And that my boss at the time set me up and connected me to him. I appreciate for that. And so it's the thought has been there of, well, doing something like that again for a while. Um, I'm gonna muse a little bit about what Substack makes me think of or reminds me of. I think that primarily Substack is associated with major authors, media folks, figures who have gone independent one way or another, and they're using Substack as a platform for that, and that's what it's good for. Um, it's interesting looking at the video here. I'm seeing how much I use my eyebrows and my hands. I talk with my hands a lot. I'm a gesturer, animated, but I digress. So to get back to what is Substack, uh, I think that's what it's known for the best. I've followed a few people on here, at least one person who had previously had an organization that was a part of a much larger media organization, a major broadcaster and streamer and entertainment company, because of course everything's very consolidated now, which is one of the reasons why everyone is going independent. Increasingly, that consolidation is leading to a erosion of freedom of speech and press freedom. And yeah, by people who are directly aligned with regimes, including the one here, taking those over and trying to slant things in those directions, shut various things down. I'm not really going to go into that a bunch, at least not now, maybe not ever. There's lots of talk that's been done about that. Lots of people, lots of other stuff that you can kind of connect to about that. But that is part of the media landscape. For me, though, what Substack reminds me of, at least a little bit, is LiveJournal. And then I'm dating myself here. This is not only before any of the many social media platforms that might be considered contemporaneous. See, I'm getting those words all smushed together. Considered contemporaneous. Those so like Twitch, which is more broadcasting, a little more like this, but different, more live oriented. They have lives here too, though. I might do one if also I'm interested in what people are interested in and what kind of content, I'll get to that, but what kind of content you might be interested in, as a paid subscription as well, to kind of how to differentiate those things, the paid versus the free. Um, so to me, it reminds me of LiveJournal. So if we're talking about like the current social media things, Snap, whatever, those kinds of things, Meta's platforms, Instagram, Facebook. Before all of that, I remember, and I think there's other millennials, probably a lot of other millennials that remember MySpace, and some younger folks have been like turned on to it and told about it. And maybe, there's a little bit of a retro cachet about that. But for me, I remember even before that, there was LiveJournal, which was kind of personal microblogging site, or not even microblogging, just blogging site and personal blogging site. And is connecting to friends, and there was a lot that I liked about that. There was a lot that fit me well as a person who's a writer. I've written other things. I've written screenplays. I've written all of them. I've produced screenplays, plays, short and full length, and various things. So I've done a lot of writing, and I've done personal writing quite a bit, and then obviously some of the media work. Um, so for me, that was really great, and could connect with friends. And I think I probably threw some poetry or song lyrics even that I was writing at the time. I do have some poetry that I'm sitting on. That's one possible thing I might put on this at some tier, maybe on the paid tier. Um, I've done filmmaking work, and I might throw clips of that up, or I might do new kind of experiments. That's another possibility of something I might throw on the paid side of things. I could throw it on this side of things, but this Substack started, and I guess so at this point, over maybe a couple of weeks ago, at this point, almost, um, or more, uh, got the first post because I was putting together a document and trying to figure out a way to disseminate it to people who I knew who might be interested in it. It was just a set of my recommendations for the May 19th Democratic primary in Oregon, mostly for the Portland metro area, a little bit beyond that. And it was kind of a consolidation of a bunch of, you can look at the posts. It's the first post on the Substack, but it's a consolidation of a bunch of different recommendations by a bunch of different organizations that people might generally consider progressive, on the more kind of robust side of that. Um, and, for anywhere from like people who make only just a few endorsements and then a few green lights and red lights, like DSA, and then organizations like Next Up Oregon, which is kind of a youth vote organization, Working Families Party, who do probably the most endorsements of any of those orgs, Progressive Voters Network, some of these others, and just kind of bringing those together. And then a few of my own that some, even one or two that kind of flew in the face of some of those endorsements. Um, and for kind of down the ballot, down to kind of what was there, because I think that it can be a lot of work to do research to find out these things. And because I'm interested in them, I've gotten plugged into these organizations. I've found where, and I was, I'm all but dissertation, or I was, I guess you never stop being, in a way, all but there's a whole controversy over that, actually. But if you are forever all but dissertation, and you get to like say that and put that on documents, or if it's just a temporary status until you know you actually end up finishing a PhD. I left a PhD, in theater and performance studies, and but there's a lot of research skills relating to that, and independent of that, these helped me in putting together this document. And I was like, this is a lot of work. It can be a lot of work. And so I wanted to provide people with some of those recommendations. Oh, also the Portland Mercury, the paper, that was one of the sources as well. The local alternative paper in the Portland area. So I think there will probably be more of that kind of thing, especially on the free side of stuff. I'll probably do some kind of a thing for the general election, although that's going to be a little less dramatic, probably. It might be, who knows? It might be dramatic, because if I tell you, who or what I'm voting for, it could be pretty controversial, given the fact that the current governor of Oregon is very disliked, and the fact that she demoralizes her base is probably going to make it a really close race with the Republican in a state in the sense of Oregon that's actually got the same partisan composition as the state of New York, but doesn't act like it in politics, and also has a lot of corruption because there's never been any campaign finance limits at any point in Oregon, anyways, in the state government, anyways, among other reasons. There's other history reasons, and at some point I might get into them, either myself or maybe having a conversation with some people who even know more about that. And so that brings me to like things that I am considering in this Substack. So one of the things that I'm considering is that sort of thing. Like I said, I did that in the past with another org. That the capacity to do that is built in here at Substack, and you may have seen those live conversations on other Substacks. So I'm interested in doing that. I have some equipment that works well for that, and I have some friends and people who I don't know personally, but who are interesting and do interesting stuff, and who might be interested in having a conversation. Some of that might happen as the Substack builds, and we'll see how that goes. I'm trying to really kind of go with what energy I have, where I have energy, and then what the reception is. There's been some reception. There's been some people following, some subscription increases. There's some people who started following me on social media who run comms for some orgs that are pretty major. Some other things that made me think, okay, this is getting out. There's some traction. There's maybe some interest, and then some people who showed some interest in a paid tier. So things I'm thinking about doing, I might do more just conversations. I might even do just like news roundups, in the sense of like, these are things that I'm interested in, that I've noticed. Some of it's like, oh, things I had a conversation with my mom about, and a lot of the progressive orgs don't have their own dedicated podcasts or anything like that. And podcasts are a really big way that people get information these days, in the kind of like fragmentation of information sources, even more than reading things, because you can listen to a podcast while you're doing other things. I've never been a huge podcast person. I'm getting to be a little more, my frustration of not finding the one thing. It's like trying to find this and that from this another podcast. It can be a little tedious. I'm not sure that I'm at the point to be that. That's something that this might build to, and there might be aspects of that from the beginning. Um, then, like I said, there may be creative side of it, and I might do a little at the end, a little preview of kind of each of these things, the creative side of it. Um, like maybe I've seen some films recently, and I might be open to like reviewing specific things that people suggest. Um, especially, people send me some Vimeo tips through on the Vimeo line. Uh, then that I doesn't mean it's going to be a good review. It just means I might that okay. Then I'll take a look at something and talk about that and review that. And I'm interested in people's feedback as far as what might be on the free side versus on the paid side. I'm a little inclined to do things that are a little more personal, a little more creative, throw those on the paid side just to have a little bit of differentiation, but we'll kind of see how things develop. So these are kind of possibilities, things like reviews or kind of general arts and culture things, interviews with folks, um, and or kind of news roundups. So and then or my own creative works, whether that's um, I don't know that I would really do music on here per se, and I haven't engaged with that a ton as much as far as my own original music for years, really much. But it's possible. We'll see. And then, but maybe some filmmaking stuff, maybe some other stuff, and we'll see. I may get a new phone. It may have a little better photo capacity. Who knows? Maybe even if people want to see pictures of food that I've made, I might even mention food that I'm like, oh, I gotta go. I gotta make something. I also, might do, probably not here, but maybe on the YouTube, which in the future I'll kind of talk about those things and push them and promote them a little more. But they're still very much developing. Might throw some like gameplay throughs onto that. Mostly me being like, what's going on? And then maybe also some weird kind of leftist-ish commentary on the context of, shooter games or military or future visions, future worlds in different games. Yeah, so those are things I'm thinking about, possibilities. That, like I said, that's probably less likely to end up here. If it did, at first I'd have to check if Substack even allows that, and then if they do, it would probably be once again, that'd be on the pay side, but probably be if I throw it up, I'd probably throw it up on YouTube too, and that probably wouldn't be paid, but we'll see. Like I said, we're gonna see how this develops. So yeah, let's do a little I'll do a little preview of a couple of things. So first, we'll do like kind of the review. So recently I saw a film by Boots Riley, who I am a fan of, musically and even more in his films. He has an aesthetic that is a little similar to, in the background, you might see here, it's film Poesia Sin Fin by Alejandro Jodorowsky. Um, that one is a little less, that Poesia Sin Fin is a little less the way I'm going to talk about. But there's ways in which Boots Riley's style reminds me a little bit of Alejandro Jodorowsky. There's an intensity, there's some ultra violence in it, there's surrealism, grotesquerie, there's political themes. The political themes are a little more to the front in Boots Riley's work. They're a little more backgrounded in Jodorowsky's work, but like if I think of El Topo, which is probably like the film, that and The Holy Mountain that he's known for, El Topo in particular, there is a kind of a post-colonial. I just saw that in the theater on my birthday recently, and yeah, it's very much post-colonial themes, and that fits with the times that it was made, and with kind of the concerns and his thoughts, and the culture that he was embedded in of artists and of counterculture and various things at that time. But so these elements, the surreal, they're very similar. So they remind me of that, something I'm into in many ways. And I liked his previous film, Sorry to Bother You, which I guess evidently was based on a song by his band, The Coup. He's a Bay Area, well, not just Bay Area, Oakland specifically, not just Bay Area, Oakland artist. Really comes out of the Oakland, and in many ways, I think you wouldn't it'd be hard to find someone that just like Boots who doesn't come from Oakland. There's just the stylistic innovation and playfulness, the connection to music, the connection to radical politics, and all of that. It's there's something about it I think that is very Oakland. So um I really liked the previous film, Sorry to Bother You, or as people often call it, the White Voice film, because there's a whole thing about that about black folks putting on at working in phone customer service, putting on the white voice, sound like a white guy, and then getting more existential about that, and eventually, some strange, unexpected, surreal, intense turns at the end of it that I won't give away because the surprise is a lot of fun. If you haven't already seen it, I would suggest seeing it. But once again, my mom was probably going to be listening to this. She may not be into this style of film. Some of you may not be into this style of film, and that's fine. You don't need to go see it unless you want to. But the new film very much like that, but then in other ways, and becomes even more intensely and explicitly political. I think it's very much responding to the moment. It gives a very literal depiction of the sock puppet phenomenon that's really at this point it's taken over social media mostly. So many comments, especially on anything political, are by more or less fake accounts. They're a bunch of accounts run by someone, either individuals or bot farms, or being paid by foreign governments, whether it's Russia or China or Israel being the big one, or the US government itself, its defense department, its justice department, the variety of parts of the authoritarian agenda is trying to use social media to flood the zone, manufacture consent, make it seem like far more people support things that actually do, isolate people, make them feel overwhelmed, these kinds of things, and just try to push agendas. It's all part of what's going on right now, which can feel really negative and overwhelming. But I think, for example, when I created um, the endorsements, that was I feel like there's a lot positive to be thought about recent now. But the film was very much leans into that moment. It's very much feeling this moment. So I won't give it all away, but, dialectical materialism actually ends up being this big thing in it, and there's a device that's a dialectical materialism device, and they use it for that, and I would have never thought of that. It's a great kind of sci-fi-ish trope that comes into this and accelerating the contradictions and, and then ends in a kind of a cross-national, internationalist labor action, in the face of people who and for me, the line, and I'll give you this line, it's a line not spoken by one of the main characters, but that's spoken to kind of the big villain, the played by Demi Moore, this fashion designer who rips off other people's designs and then considers herself basically kind of a god, and everyone else is her clay to, as an artist to work with it. And in response to that, finally, her assistant finally gets a word in when everything's coming against her together, and says, people want to create the art. They don't want to be the medium. They don't want to be the art that's created by someone else. And I think there's something about that that really encapsulates is what a lot of us are feeling and have felt maybe our entire lives. But I think the contradictions are intensifying, and that feeling in some level or another of wanting to be an actor rather than constantly acted upon, constantly used for the agendas of um, techno oligarchs and authoritarians and all of these all over the world, and just the old-fashioned political establishment, which is basically handing over everything in all of society over to authoritarians on a plate. Um, and yeah, so obviously, not everyone's going to agree with me. This is Substack. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. But there's a lot about that film that I would recommend to people who are into, kind of any kind of, if you're into weird or strange or extreme or just different film, I would definitely say that. If you're into, more surrealist grotesquerie, in a context that still has kind of some realism, but there's a very storybook element to it, set contemporaneously though. Yeah. So any of those, yeah, if you're a Boots Riley fan, obviously, um, any of that. So I already ended up talking politics in the context of that because it's kind of impossible not to. So I'll just kind of talk a little bit about kind of roundup of things that are making me. For one, there are a lot of candidates that really are more grassroots people power candidates standing up for populism, a left populism that are, especially in primaries, that are really surging, but not just, well, I mean, obviously it's primary season, it's not general season, so we'll get there eventually. They're having a lot of success, both in polls and in general election polls, which can be a little unpredictable this time of year, but still, it's the best you have. They're being successful in primaries. For example, like in the May 19 primaries, every candidate that DSA endorsed, and by the way, DSA is Democratic Socialists of America. At some point in the future, I will probably either myself talk about, or it'd be cool actually to be able to bring someone on who knows more about the history to talk about what actually democratic socialism is, because I think a lot of people have, especially from older generations or different backgrounds or whatnot, or different political orientations, or who just what you've heard, may have some certain ideas or some concepts about socialism or DSA or any of those things that are just not accurate. So you could talk about its history. You could talk about what is democratic socialism, right? What makes it different? What then maybe like non-democratic socialism, or things that people consider democratic that aren't socialism, which is kind of iffy. If it's not socialism, democracy pretty much always um, backslides into authoritarianism, and sometimes on the other side too, right? That's why it's democratic socialism. Um, but so that might be a future thing, and it might be nice to have someone on to talk about that. But all of the candidates the DSA endorsed in these primary elections either won them or advanced to a runoff. So where they have a chance to win them, and I think a good chance, obviously, if you're advancing to the runoff. I mean, well, a lot of that is because DSA is actually very select in its endorsement. They have other elements of their strategy that are maybe that at the heart of DSA, the membership themselves, the organizations that the kind of factions, if you want to call it, groups that are the most strong in that coalition. They value other aspects even more than the electoral aspect, and there's upsides and there's downsides to that, but I think it's overall a good thing because the things they value are things like worker organizing and supporting, all of that and people's empowerment in that kind of a way and self-empowerment. Um, and, that's a whole other thing. That'd be a great thing to have a conversation about too, about labor and union organizing and activism. So that might be something that happens in a future one too. What's going on in the moment, how it is in the context of history, how it is in the context of everything else that's going on. But that's an optimistic. There's positive things happening and building for a future that it's that or barbarism, and increasingly barbarism is very much taking over. And yeah, um, that is, um, but there's a lot of pushback to that. And so another element on the pushback to that is kind of like speaking of techno oligarchs, probably one of the best known and most powerful techno oligarchs in the world, probably more powerful than known, although increasingly known, is a guy who's backed a lot of the others and who basically created the current vice president as a political figure. Peter Thiel. So he announced that his husband and their children are moving to Argentina because they feel like the political climate in the United States is starting to, be something that might be an issue for them. And given that he runs Palantir, which is all about mass surveillance and all about AI and warfare, all of the kind of driving all of the evil authoritarian things, and some things that some people might consider more practical, but that also are very connected to serious potential for abuse of power and empowering authoritarians and surveillance that are like consolidation of and things working with government data and various organizations. So kind of at the where AI is really about, that's not just hype, which is about surveillance, authoritarianism, repression of people, the creation of a variety of robots and drones that kill people and using them for warfare primarily, but also then increasingly in policing as well in various different ways. Kind of the dystopian future that for an average person is very dystopian, and I think that goes far beyond also. Like partisan or ideological lines, the feeling that that is not a future that we want. There's, a small zip code in Silicon Valley, a number of people who think that's great, and most other people think it's awful. Um, Data centers, that's probably another thing we'll have a conversation about. But the idea that he said he's going to move away from the U.S. even while like Trump is in power and pushing this agenda. He's pushed successfully and got it through Congress to like making a preempt AI regulations on any kind of level. All these kind of things that seem like a perfect environment for that. But the tide is turning popularly so far against all of those things. And there's this idea, oh, you can't fight back, you can't be successful against these things, they're inevitable. But pretty much nothing is inevitable. I mean, like, we're all gonna die eventually. I mean, at some point, the sun will probably burn up, some of those things, but, like, all other than that, almost nothing is inevitable. And if efforts couldn't be successful to, you know, resist, no one would be telling you that they can't be successful. Like, if they really 100% were pointless, no one would tell you they're pointless. Because why would you tell people they're pointless? Like, they're gonna be pointless in that it's a strategy, right? And clearly people are kind of on the run, lots of billionaires, Jeff Bezos, whatever, trying to defend things, speaking out against things, even though stuff is no skin off of their back. A wealth tax, they're still going to be a slightly less of a multi-billionaire. Not going to make any difference to them. They're going to maybe be able to build one less rocket that explodes on the platform, um, uh, yeah, or buy one less yacht to put inside their bigger yacht. So I think, yeah, there may be some of that kind of talk in the future, but these are both kind of hopeful indicators, things that are on my radar screen, because my radar screen isn't primarily coming through major or even independent media sources, some through independent media sources. And I do find a lot of things through that in various activist organizations and just poking around myself. And So there's probably going to be some sharing of that. So I am interested in people's thoughts about kind of like what they're interested in seeing or hearing or kind of the future. Um, yeah, and we're gonna see how things develop. It's very much, I don't know. It's a very we're gonna get out into Wu Wei, and back in Tai Chi and Wu Chi. Um, yeah, Tai Chi and Wu Chi. No, so we're gonna see expression outwards and then coming back into stillness. We're gonna just see where's the energy going, both on my side and on the other side, and see how this thing develops. All right. Like I said, happy to, kind of hear your feedback on all of that, whether it's in a message, whether it's in comments on this. I'll try to turn comments on so people can do that. Obviously that can be a problem, comments or messages. So we all know how toxic it's possible for them to get. I've seen them get a little toxic even on Substacks. It's not usually as bad, but who knows? It could be a matter of time. We've all seen how things can change. Um, and I don't have necessarily a lot of time or energy for managing that if that goes sideways. So we'll see what level of that we put in place at some point, and or on some posts it may be only paid subscribers that can comment, or there may be some other, or just only people who follow or only people who subscribe, or I'm going to be pretty. I want people's feedback, but I also will be pretty active about curating it as a space that works for me and hopefully works for most of the people who are interested. All right. Well, I've rattled on for a while, and I think in the future, maybe paid subscribers will get more prattling on for a while, and maybe I'll try to be a little more succinct in these main things. But that's kind of a part of what you'll probably get with this is a mixture. In the future, I will probably try to break things down separately, though. So if I'm doing a review of something, I'll just have that as its own video, etc. All right. Well, and also that's something I would be interested in feedback about too. Would you rather have that, or would you have things thrown into kind of one big episode? And I may end up doing what I want to do, even. I'll be honest about that. Even if there's a consensus of what you want, it is a dialogue, right, between what works for you, what works for me. We're gonna see. Hey, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for paying attention. Thanks for caring. And thanks for sharing. Also, like, let people know if you know people who you think they might be interested in this. If you know people who might be interested in having me on theirs, or doing a collaboration, especially if they're in like the Portland metro area or Oregon, or even in the field. They don't have to just be in this area. I mean, yeah, like Washington County is a great one, especially in the area. But I've had conversations and would have conversations with people in other countries, in other parts of the country. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that. So I'll leave it at that for now, and looking forward to any useful feedback or affirmation. Also, if you're interested, if you'd like to support me at all, please do go ahead and you can just send tips to the Venmo. That's the easiest, most straightforward kind of way. If you want to support me through Substack, obviously they take a cut of that, but they provide this service, so I appreciate that. Please go ahead and do that, and also like paid subscriptions on here help for count, and I think they also help for reach. Um, so I appreciate that as well. Thanks, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.